This is reassembly of the Powerfist engine. You have everything apart and you've measured everything. First thing you're going to do is you're going to put the crankshaft in. So you're going to have the PTO end of the crankshaft pointing up towards yourself. Make sure you put oil on the journals, as I've done already before the video, to put them in. After that, we're going to put the piston in. Now I've got piston installation instructions on a link on the reassembly instructions that is on Google Classroom. So if you want to do that, you can click on that link for a more detailed step-by-step. Otherwise, we're just going to watch what I do here, and I'll give you a few pointers as we go back together. You may see on this, as compared to the piston installation instructions from the link, that I am putting the piston ring compressor upside down as compared to the other one. So this is a different system, so you just follow the instructions that you're seeing on this video with the piston ring compressor upside down, and it'll work out well for you. So there's a little arrow on top. We want to make sure that arrow points in the proper direction, and that is towards where the push rods come out, so we make sure that's good. Should just go in nicely. One thing I forgot to mention is that the crankshaft needs to be at bottom dead center when you put the piston in, so make sure that you have done that. Just from a different angle, you can see everything goes back nice and simple. Good, so the connecting rod should line up with the connecting rod journal of the crankshaft. And then you're going to put the connecting rod cap on. Once again, we noted when we took it apart the different markings on the connecting rod cap and the connecting rod. So once again, we'll make sure that those are lined up properly. We put the bolts in and we tighten them up. Now it's very important, every bolt is a torqued bolt. I've said that over and over in my classes to you guys, so I'm going to make sure that that's the same here. So we're going to take our torque wrench. This is a click type torque wrench. And we're going to set it to the proper torque. You will have figured that out already from your torque chart. And we're going to torque the bolts. Make sure you get a good solid click. You might have to turn the crankshaft to fit the torque wrench in there properly. So we're going to pull the crankshaft thrust washer off, and we're going to reposition the crankshaft so that the dot on the timing gear on the crankshaft is pointed in the direction of the camshaft. The lifters will go in next. We take the lifters and slide them back into where they came from. And then we'll grab our crankshaft, and we need to take the timing dot. You can see right there, it's got to line up with the timing dot on the crankshaft gear. It has to be perfect. If it's not perfect, then the valves don't open at the right time and it won't start. So we're going to make sure that those are perfectly lined up and ready to go. If it's out of tooth, pull the camshaft out just slightly and wiggle it back into place. The gears are not straight spur gears, so they may turn as it goes together, so we got to be careful of that. That's our governor rod. We need to make sure that's pointed straight up and down. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to wipe off the surface of the crankcase just to make sure that it's nice and clean and free of oil. Gaskets don't require oil, otherwise they're going to leak. So we'll put the thrust washer back on. And then we're going to grab a gasket that I've made. If you wanted to look at some instructions on how to make a gasket, they're on your instructions. There's a link on your instructions. It fits nicely around the dowels. Now, you want to make sure that that rod, the governor rod, fits right in that space right there. And you're going to make sure that you put a little cap on there. If you didn't have one, you should find one from Mr. Martin's and he'll give you one. It goes in there. Crankcase cover goes on. And you might find it a little bit difficult to get on. That's because the seal on the crankshaft seal has a little lip on it. You see we're struggling a bit. We turn the crankshaft a little bit with the crankshaft holder just to try and get it on. It's not going. I'm just going to check the governor rod, make sure it's still good. Let's use gravity to our advantage. We turn the crankshaft a little bit of pressure, and it'll pop right down. So the next thing you're going to do is put the bolts in. So we're putting the bolts in. We're going to make sure that they're nice and snug. Remember, it's a good idea to start them all before you snug them all down and tighten them up. And once again, every bolt's a torque bolt. So as soon as you get those done, don't wait for another time. Just going to torque those right now, and then you're not going to forget them. Make sure you write down your crankcase cover bolt torque on your paper, and then when it comes to the checkpoint, I'll be able to see that you have it marked down. Now we're going to move to the top of the engine where the cylinder head is. You can see our cylinder head gasket's going to go on, and we're lining it up with those dowels. Make sure those dowels are in place. We're going to take our cylinder head and we're going to put it in place. If you've removed the valves previously, we need to reinstall those before this step. It's a little tricky to get the cylinder head to settle around those dowels, but eventually will. Cylinder head bolts are next. There's 4 of them. Bolts are in. I will never stop reminding you to torque all the bolts. So every bolt's a torque bolt. Find out the correct torque. Now this torque will be a little bit higher because you're holding the cylinder head on. And when the piston is coming up on the compression stroke, there's a lot of force pushing that on those bolts to try and push that cylinder head right off. So these will be a little bit tighter. Make sure you get these right. If you don't, and there's a leak in a space between the cylinder head and the gasket and the cylinder block, you will have leakage there. And if that happens, then you will have a loss of compression and the engine won't run, or won't run very well. Next thing we'll see here is reassembling the rocker arms and putting the push rods back in. Now those push rods are in a certain spot. You can see I'm turning the crankshaft or the crankshaft holder. And if you look closely at the push rods that I just put in, I'm going to put my finger on one of them, and we're just going to see them. We want to make sure they don't come up and down, and so that we're in a neutral place. That means it's on the power stroke. So we position the rocker arms over top of the valves and the push rods. And after this, we're going to set the valve clearance. Now the valve clearance setting instructions are on a link on the notes, so you can click on that, and that shouldn't be a problem, and you'll just watch how that all works. You can see the rocker arms right now on our video are going up and down. So I have set the valve clearance as in the other video, and we're going to put the rocker cover gasket and the rocker cover on and put the bolts in, and we're going to torque them down. can see on this one I've switched to a beam type torque wrench. The very likelihood of that is that it is a little bit more accurate than the lower points of the click type torque wrench. So I think the click type torque wrench doesn't go very low, and so if I need to do a little bit lower one, as in here, then I'll use a beam type torque wrench. And that's all.